Alrighty, daily trading recap for this Tuesday, the 18th of January, 2022, coming off of this first day of the week after the Martin Luther King Jr. Day acknowledgement yesterday. So first day of the week on this Tuesday. SPY having a little red day, 1.7% showing in the red here. It's just so funny to watch any of the, even Fox News or CNBCs or just any financial market show, just the reasons they try to give. They have to, of course, anytime and anywhere of why the stock market is doing anything, but it's just so funny that nobody knows anything. Even the people that do, we just don't know anything. This market, this day trading, it's just... It's anybody's best guess. Sometimes it's a flip of a coin. Sometimes it's a flip of 1 million coins, and it's not even the correct answer after that. It's just funny to live in this world of that's just so many different perspectives and ideals on what is actually happening or what is there. But price at the end of the day is king, and that's going to reflect every single thing that we determine ourselves off of. We have to. That is the measure. Getting pretty philosophical with that. Little red day that I had today, but started off pretty nicely and developing more fine-tuningness again of that morning dump strategy, and I'm really honing in on that. And I feel with this market as we have right now, man, it's just time to slam a jamma these types of patterns. In the one that I had today, CELU, that is the frickin' chart. That is the A+. That is the kind of holy grail representation of what I want to go off of and just absolutely unload on, and maybe even save myself a little bit more so I can not so much focus more on that one, but just like that is the focus for what I want to be doing for that style of trade. And then getting a little bit not off topic, but just exploring myself more and learning more lessons through Neuro and understanding more about that specific pattern and playbook trade I have for myself in that chart. So lots of things to go over with those individual tickers. Things still spiking. We got DWAC going big today, which we're very excited about. BBIG. Other ones, I had a lot of charts on my screen that were still spiking in the morning session, even though the market was still pulling red here within that morning volatility. But good to see. And it's, the 3 out of 4 stocks follow the market, but it's, small cappers, OTCers, they can kind of do whatever they want to. They don't have to follow the market precisely. And yes, I always want to be looking at the chart, the market in the corner of the screen, but I can't let that specifically dictate whether or not I get long on a specific stock. If the pattern is there, then God, the pattern is there. Market internals on the day, just as reference for me, extremely low dollar volume on the NASDAQ as of hour and 10 minutes after the close here. 205 billion on the NASDAQ, nice see. 320 billion showing. OTC markets $2.5 billion volume on the day. That's all I had for the introduction. Let's get into the individual tickers, starting off with CELU. 34 million float. American biotech. Newscast today was the FDA fast track designation for its cancer thing, whatever. It's looking back at all these little biotech news, me trying to pronounce them or go through them, and like at least 75% of these news catalysts are just straight over the top of the head. I just have zero idea what's going on. It's good news. Okay, well that's good to hear. Some of the words in there, it's just like, oh, okay, I understand some of these words. Regardless, man, this is what I alluded to in the introduction. Pristine, beautiful. Everything for the morning dump strategy opportunity. Oh my goodness. I got in pretty late to the party. I just barely was able to pull this one, or this one just barely popped up on the scanner. I think I caught it a little bit late, already as it was pulling off of this failure to maintain VWAP, that the sharp turn of that VWAP line that literally turns into an upside down V starts to pull off. I get a 5-2 fill as I'm trying to work myself out, and I kept my size pretty low, keeping it to $1,000 size for what I normally want to be stepping up with the account size that I'm trying to look right now, while I'm still segregated with my day trading account so I can have more day trades on the day, split up that cash. Man, I want to be stepping up that size more. But for how late I felt I was getting into the party, and a little bit chasey almost, I did keep that size down just to respect, to say, hey, I don't want to play with fire or just force my hands so much with this one. But man, even if I did force a big hand on that one, this was a pretty pristine and awesome downside chart on this trade today. Immediate rejection after that huge spike off of that news catalyst. That is this exact trade to a T. Downtrending daily. Just continual bleeding death for any longs that as soon as any pop comes in there, whether algorithmic push based off of that news catalyst or just automatic sell based on emotion, gosh, that pattern is so freaking there. And the time frame that it happens to, just immediately as it's continuing to fall. And yeah, it's showing a little bit of bid support along the way, and that forces me to cover. Not forces me, but I choose to cover. I think I covered half at 4.7 there as it's holding a little bit decently well. But then with that last 100 shares, knowing that man, these charts have just continued to die off, not only in pre-market, but the rest of market hours themselves too. So it's almost stupid for me to be taking off anything and not holding until like, what a beautiful representation of that type of chart that I'm looking for. Of why would I be covering anything if it's not pressing me hard against me and waiting for this like stagnation, just literal nothing doginess of price action at 385. Okay, I can cover there. I'll meet any bid like for the size I'm trading. It's just easy to meet any bid at that point. That like price is done. It's not going to go down anymore. Like you got your fill for the day. That is the equivalent of what I'm looking for this style of trade. So as I'll go into Neuro and explain the reverse side of this style of trade and the continual fine-tuning of this strategy of what I want to do further as the market sentiment still is there for this type of pattern, just slamming these back to the downside. Growing that strategy of how I look to start to cut these for the risk profile, and then where I start to look to take profits that I can. I initially wanted to, starting this pattern, I initially wanted to frame it in the same sort of perspective that I do with really any other strategy of paying myself along the way and keeping a profit target in mind. But if prices reach in certain points and if the level 2 time and sales is telling me something, then don't be stupid. Don't be playing with fire. Take the money when I can, not when I have to. That Tom Sosnoff quote. So that's why I always was a key proponent of, okay, it's kind of bottoming here. We're showing a little bit of just like hitch in that huge fall. It had a huge fall off with big volume from that VWAP projection already. Okay, let's take off at least a little bit. But this strategy itself, this morning dump strategy, isn't based on any fundamentals, and it isn't really based on that same type of mentality that I take the profit-taking strategy of. And I was handcuffing myself so many times because then, I would obviously use a risk level of high of day. And I'll get into that with Neuro and the same thing. Normally, I'd be risking that high of day. And this strategy would end up turning into this either huge gunslinger, huge loss that this pattern would have to be a huge win rate even for me to be successful, profitable with it. And then the winners, I would just be scaling out along the way, taking safe profits, but in reality, cutting my profits short because I was like having my size all the way down and turning what was what today was, 25, 4. I don't even want to do that math. 5.4 to 4. 1.4 minus 5. Let's do that quick. Okay, 5.4 to even 3.8. That's like a 22% move even for that. Turning these 22% moves, and yeah, great. Okay, I took 14% out of it in this move. But those little tiny percents are what's going to be the main difference point. And it's hard to nickel and dime myself like that of, well, okay, it was a nice winner. And that I've related to this in a lot of the past day trading recaps as well, that, the strategies I want to be going towards are the ones where it's always going to be in your favor. These style of trades where it doesn't really matter so much exactly where you get in, like exactly where I got in at 5.2. Like you're going to define an area of failure to maintain VWAP, this little price range, maybe consider it from 5.6 to 5.2-ish area. Anything below that, then you really are chasing. But more so that pattern built on the back of, it's always going to be in your favor and you can never really be wrong. You're just going to make money with it versus, okay, now we can fine-tune the strategy even a little bit more and knock off some of that lackadaisicality, if that's a word, of, no, this is where you have to get that entry point. And knowing that, okay, if I do miss this one, but I still feel the parameters for this trade are there, then we can size down and we can take these different limiting factors that way. But now we can start to, as we're in it more and more, like there is no other option but then to milk everything that there is possible out of this and get closer to that line of perfection of understanding where are the tops on these ones. What is that actual point of turning reversal of that trend, whether it's algorithmic push based just off of that news catalyst or whether there is actually overhead on this one and when that starts to come in. All those different factors gets us closer to that unattainable that it's ever going to be of perfecting the chart, but just that is life, that is trading, of getting us closer and closer to that point. So I certainly can't knock myself for taking 14%, but this chart specifically does push me harder to say there is still a heck of a lot more opportunity on these style of charts. And I definitely do off of Neuro as well that I'm mentioning Neuro a lot. But just saying, hey, it doesn't have to be just because it spikes, just because it looks similar to this that we get an entry. We can define it a little bit more based on, hey, I don't want it to be below a 20 million float. Hey, I don't want it to be below or above $1, $5, whatever. Defining more parameters like that and being willing to let other ones go that do that. And that's going to be part of trading in itself. But golly, CELU, A plus idea. I got to say it, A plus idea for this playbook trade for me. A grade for the execution, even though it was a little bit chasey for how I was getting everything set, of trying to pull it up when I saw it, of trying to reserve shares. 3-cent borrow fee on this one through Trade Zero that I had today. Where I was covering, I still think there is definitely a lot more room. Not A plus that I can say myself. I mean, if I was holding this thing and covering it full at 3.8, even at $4 into market hours, man, then I could get myself an A plus on that. But golly, this is exciting. This is the reason why we traded. And it truly wasn't about making that quick cash for me, and I really had no, reflecting back on it, had no intention of looking at that P&L or looking at, okay, this is going to like boost me super nicely for the week, for the month in the P&L. This was just a total, man, this is that style of trade. The money's going to come later. The money will come. I fully know that. But man, this is the pattern that we just slammed and nailed. And that's where I want to get to more and more with these style of charts. A plus for idea, A grade for execution there on CELU. Going into RELI that I traded, I really don't know. Looking back on this one, it was just a weird style of trade. And I don't know if it was a little bit of overconfidence, maybe coming off of CELU, that first day back after a long weekend. First ticker we go in, make 14%. This game is easy. All you got to do is push buttons and you make money, right? Maybe taking a little hint from that. Not believing that fully, of course, always staying humble the best we can, but just kind of the ideas that I was picking. I knew I had this one on the watch list from over the weekend and coming into today too, pulling this chart up again, of looking at the daily, the low floaterness of it, 6 million float. Okay, it's a nice little multi-day pattern. We could have $10 as a key little indicator mark to potentially screw around with or try and attract to today, or developing within the next few days maybe. Okay, do we get an entry here and then pulling it up again on the scanner, like when we're doing morning watch list, all that type of work? It's pushing nice price action with a pretty wide spread, but it was just like, whoa, like where do you kind of come from? Is some news catalyst out? Am I getting in early on a like spiky news here? And got in 10 shares at 870, pretty much top ticked it. You can't even find the tick there because it was just non-existent for the size that I was taking on that. But stupid entry, and what I was expecting out of that specific entry point for a trade, I really can't describe it. And I think it was a little bit too much of that overconfidence of just cloud nine-ish of, all you got to do is push buttons. Everything I see turns to gold, right? And believing that little fairy tale lie. Sure enough, it does pull back, drops under VWAP before market open, but has a nice little rise back to VWAP within the first 2 minutes. And it's at that point that I scale back in, as it's showing a pretty decent amount of strength, hitting some ask there, continuing to slap. Keeps rising, goes all the way to above $9. I take off a little bit. I take off 5 shares of the 20 shares that I do have, just to take safe profits along the way. Hey, we're kind of topping here around $9. Sure enough, that does end up being a little top for the morning volatility, and then I end up cutting the rest as it breaks this little range just below 855 there for what I thought the sentiment for the new trade that I was in should have been, of looking at this style of trade as maybe a dip and rip, a pre-market dip to VWAP rip there, ultimately looking for, keeping in the back of my mind, that $10 level push to get to that real true breakout level area. Maybe relate it similar to a DWAC style of trade where I first entered it, of, okay, it's not like a wedge pattern that I thought DWAC was initially on my entry there. But for this one today, hey, it's been holding these past few trading days, a little bit of sell-offishness, but you could say we could be climbing here within these next few days and playing based off of that. In reality, grade that I give myself for the idea on this trade is a D. I don't feel that there was huge solidity to this trade, even though sure enough, we get to that afternoon session perfectly right at lunch, 12 noon. We're creating this nice, beautiful little peak, comes to 989 there. For a high that, man, where was that in the morning session? And I'm kind of glad looking back on it that it didn't end up doing that during that morning session, because I probably would have gotten way, way too high on my horses. Just like, everything I touch turns to gold, right? I'm a genius trader. Has a little sell before the close afternoon. But regardless of that, there just really wasn't any substance to this trade. And I think I was just pushing buttons and seeing green and pushing based on that green. And not really trading based off of substance on this trade. So reflecting from that execution for the trade that I was trading on, that secondary trade, I can give myself a C. Also equating a little bit of that first entry in there as well too, to say, man, what were you doing with that one? That was just kind of wonky, silly, stupid trading in that time frame, but scaling out with profits, identifying tops there, and at least taking some money off the table with those points, and then respecting when I knew the chart wasn't going where I needed it to go for the type of pattern that I wanted to see out of that, and respecting those levels there. That was RELI. Now on to Neuro. Beautiful representation of when it goes wrong, and double entry for me in on this one, and new strategy that I have not done before on this morning dump style of strategy, where normally I would risk that high of day. I'd be getting in on that failure to maintain VWAP and be bag holding this thing short until it proved me wrong that, hey, you got to be risking that initial spike high as the point of, okay, this thing is definitely going against you. This trade is over. And now switching a little bit from that to now this double exit point, where I kind of identify any key levels I see, or if it's perking with a little bit of strength back above VWAP, okay, then it's doing something different than I want to see out of it. And that's the style of trade that I learned from the paper trading and the hard little small size cash account trading that I was doing end of November, December timeframe, where I was totally unrestricted from the PDT rule. And only bound by, okay, what are my ideas for this trade? I see the chart here. I see it could potentially do this. Let's just go based off of that, and not so bound, whether by myself or just mentally that way, but of how I just put so much value on those day trades, and then screwed myself over of, oh, well, I could bag hold this one. It could work out. I could have risked through high of day and hold that, but end up turning what could have been small little losses or eventually winners with my cleaner perspective that I had of would have been from cutting the trade, but turning those into just huge losses, and then forcing a beautiful playbook trade like this morning dump style strategy that I have on CELU into just almost a gambling environment, ecosystem, that it just became like, okay, I can't do any fundamental research based on the time frame that I have to trade these things. I see the scanner. I can see the percentage move that it's up, what the ticker name is, the float, kind of get a quick glimpse at what the news headline is. If it's not a merger or acquisition, I can obviously see that and stay away if it is, of course. But then there's really not much time for dilly-dallying. It's just seeing, okay, we're getting the price smack here. What's the borrowing fees? Okay, we got to wait for the borrow fees to come through. Okay, let's get the shares. I'm like pushing in all the buttons. That time that takes up. There is no time for recollection like this one on Neuro today specifically, when I could have pulled up when I was trying to trade this one on a dip buy when it went crazy on the 21st of July last year. Absolutely insane parabolic. It was a 3 million float during this time. It just went absolutely ludicrous out of the gate. Had a pretty nice first green day before, get a gap up into the next day and just slamming shorts. I remember I just pulled up the video before watching this one, that daily trading recap on this day, but of Kyle Williams trading this one short, and then me trying to play around fiddle with that little dip bottom there on this one. But had I seen this and reflected on that understanding characteristic for the stock, maybe that would have let me a little bit more wisdom or understanding. Gosh, this thing has the capability to just go absolutely insane. But that's market hours time frame, and yeah, this is still pre-market. It could have a little bit of sell-off. But like I related to a little bit with CELU, I don't have to take that trade then. Even though it potentially could, even though the probability may be less, I don't have to take that trade then. And this was just a unique situation that key takeaways for me on this one of, I'll get into the double trading on this one, or cutting the trade early, cutting my losses a little bit earlier. But for learning lessons, I think I tried to size up a little bit bigger with my position, going double $2,500 position size that I was taking instead of that, or not instead of, but compared to the $1,000 that I was taking on CELU, because I thought I was getting in a little bit later and a little bit sketchier. This could be a key takeaway for me of, okay, on these low floaters, maybe first off, not even trading them, just letting them do what they want to do. Or if they are below that 20 million float mark, if they are looking a little bit sketchy, this was not even close to the percentage move, the initial spike that CELU had versus what Neuro had. This was like a 12 to 15% spike here that we had. This initial point in time where CELU was like 30-ish% off of that 1 minute candle. So man, CELU was, just that beautiful, awesome A+ that even at that point, man, learning now I can totally slam those harder with bigger position size versus these ones, the Neuro. They're a little bit closer to market open. There's 30 minutes before market open. It does have that news catalyst come out, of course, which we love to see on that round number time frame that somebody knew that thing was coming out. So there could be some manipulation there. That's just a key given that we look for around those points. But another takeaway of, okay, yeah, maybe we need to size down the position size if it's a lower float, or if it's not as big of a percentage move up. I know that there's going to be less percentage move that it can come back down. It's hard to expect. They've certainly done it before, but hard to suggest or try to push on the market that it's going to dump below that previous trading day's close, or to expect it to do that, to try to force myself into a trade where the only way I get profitable or have a nice trade is if it starts to do that, because then I'm just forcing a lot more out of the charts than really needs to be there. And that's not what I want to do with this strategy. Again, kind of going around and relating on a lot of things together, but I do just want to be a part of that downhill avalanche. It just spikes off of that news catalyst, overhead sees it, the emotions start to come in. Okay, well, at least I can get out of this, or just any amount of overhead. Is the lack of demand to continue that push continues to bleed this thing dry, and I'm just along for the ride. Whereas Neuro on this one, it just becomes these little fake outs and these little plays, and it's just so evident. And you could go into a great example here of the market hours for the little rise and short squeeze it did have out of the gate. The VWAP hugging price action did have the rejection. Jack number 2 in the chat called it something of targeted price selection. I forget the term he had for it, for this specific 11 o'clock sell-off here, rejection, for how many times that has played out over and over again. But that's just a characteristic of this style of stock that, man, I really don't want to be a part of. And that's not part of what I want to be, this playbook style of strategy. So learning lessons all around, taking a little bit more of a loss P&L wise than I want to. Of course, I don't want to take any losses, but learning more from the fine-tuningness and understanding of, okay, wow, well, we have to adjust the strategy a little bit for these lower floaters. I definitely love this double, or not even a double, but a cutting early quickly, because now we're turning this loss, which was 51 cents in total that I lost on that 500 shares, versus what would have been, getting that same entry point where I would have started in, cutting like 551 on that first entry point, buying near the bottom on that little candle. Had I still been bag holding this one and respecting that initial high of day risk as the risk of 605, and in all reality, having to take slippage if I was actually going to risk that, having to take 610, 620, be taking 60 cents, taking 65, 70 cents loss if I was to continue that style of strategy on one trade versus the little bit less of a loss that I was taking by scaling out of my profits just a little bit quicker through 2 trades. So now I waste a day trade, but I do save P&L that way and get out of the way mentally as well too, to save myself, just say, okay, it's doing something different than I initially wanted it to do or thought it was going to do. Let's take a step back and reflect on what it's actually doing. So I can't even put a value on that, of the mind space that it frees up for me to see this thing clearly versus bag holding this thing. And okay, we got a rejection here at that $6 level. Now it's back under VWAP. Okay, great. Okay, now it's back above VWAP. Oh, right now we're coming back to that $6 level. Oh, it's going to hold here. And just like and not only that, but how long is this? Of 923, 918. I don't even want to do math at that point. But that even time frame of me not having to watch the level 2 in time and sales, and I can be looking at other charts or just doing other things, watching YouTube videos. How much valuable more is that time that I don't have to be just so inclined to this thing? Lots to grow on and learn from on this chart today, and both of these little morning dump style of trades, and definitely willing to pay that tax or pay that tuition cost that I paid on this one today, in order to continue to fine tune that and make it that I was on freaking cloud 9 after that CELU trade of just like, 14%. And I even like short sold myself. I could have expanded that move even more. I was in a little bit late, could have held it a little bit longer. And it's just like, this trading is so easy. This is why we do it, of here's the money. You just kind of take it. They're just like giving it away for free. versus the actual work in reality of, okay, this is why we have to work harder and fine tune these strategies, because it just doesn't happen every time you push a button. And keep your head back in reality and understand why these things work and why they don't. Gosh, yeah. Grade I can give myself for the execution, the idea in general, a D grade. I don't call it a complete failure. There's a little bit of downside left, but even at that, yeah, I don't call it an F. I just give it a D grade for the idea. Execution-wise, I can give myself an A. I can fine-tune and nitpick myself that, oh, well, I could have been out a little bit earlier, 5, 6, 7. But it was like these things to act, and that's why I was fighting that's why these ones turned into such bigger losers, because of the slippage that I would most certainly have to take because of all the other shorts that were always risking that high of day as well. And then me having to take an extra 10, 15 cents on top of what I was trying to risk or hold myself to that could be whatever risk reward profile I want to be, just depending based on what that initial high of day spike was. Man, now I can just save myself so much more mental capital and capital in general of, okay, it's holding a little bit too well above VWAP. It's pushing VWAP pretty nicely. Even though I do get a little bit of slippage because it is that VWAP little line of inflection does create some amount of bounce off of that, as other people are trading there the same way. It's still a heck of a lot better than trying to fight anything in this initial spike here and just losing my brain cells in that one. 1 cent borrow fee for those shares that I had through Trade Zero on this one. Yeah, that was it. I think that's everything I wanted to cover on Nuro. Those were my traders. I wanted to talk also about BBI on the day. This is sub-dollar, little first screen day mover. American Biopharma, big float, over like 110 million float that I'm seeing here. No found news catalyst that I saw. They got a buttload of shelves, warrants, little ATM action there. So some dilution coming in crazy. But I just wanted to point out 10-year, downtrending daily that they had on this one. You could call it a little bit of a morning jump sell-off, but not so pure of an initial spike that I would want to see. But the trade that I was kind of eyeing as it was coming into just a little bit post of 15 minutes after that morning bell of, ooh, I'll put in a little bit of a higher low there. Okay, reclaiming to VWAP. I was looking at something else or whatever trade I was in at the time, but gosh, missed that nice little entry point of identifying this little block of a trade, of calling it this little bottom rejection, selling into anything there, or even holding it into the afternoon session. You could call it that, but more so that style of trade. That's not the best representation. But even that block of a trade, nice little percentage move there, a nice little ride as along for opportunities to sell into that little higher low there, reclaim to VWAP, secondary dip and rip, initial fake out dip and rip off of that one for how it was bouncing, rejected off of VWAP there. I was initially looking too of, okay, if it's reclaiming VWAP here, it could push to a new high, test this little 29 and probably get to 30 at that point, but to no avail. But that double bottom, higher low, certainly was a nice little entry point that I just wanted to point out for me. GFAI I also wanted to talk about, and SBEV, second day freaking short plays. Man, this was a beautiful one, down 29% from the previous trading day's close. Shoulda, coulda, woulda been getting short. GFAI, that would have been Friday last week, for trading day Friday after the close. That's another strategy that I've been looking at, feeling the market has been saying has potential, but I was doing other things and it was slow day market trading then. But geez, yeah, huge and pure, beautiful sell-off. Not even only in pre, but into market hours as well. Dropping all the way from 1.4 easy to 1.2. Beautiful little sell-off on that one. SBEV. This is a more parabolic mover that it had on that Friday, going strong into the close, but even taking that thing short overnight and then playing it short out of the open with this initial try to perk above VWAP there, 3-4 rejection, and then pull down, playing anything off short off of that. Comes in with this huge sell-off on big volume right at that 11 a.m. mark. Nice little short setup on that one after the parabolic day that it had yesterday on would have been the fourth day, consider, on that run up after the first screen day. Just want to point that one out as well. And then, of course, we got to talk about good old DWAC. Still holding that one golden share from that $57 mark. And this is the perspective that I have on this one is it's not about the P&L specifically or what I'm taking back from this specific trade. It's about what this trade leads to 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, of what I know these trades can be with big position size. I'm not selling this thing till 100. I mean, it could be famous last words here. 90 could have been the exact top and maybe should have been selling into some of that 90 push I could certainly be, even looking on the daily, we're a little parabolic here on that daily candle. Of course, not compared to what it did crazily in October. Yeah, October. That was that initial crazy move. But even the volume itself, just huge volume that was pushing today. Oh gosh, it might be famous last words to not have sold into that little 90 push all the way back down to 83 VWAP area here for the after hours. But this is a fun one to watch, and definitely trading it from a huge position of power for where I'm sitting at this $57 mark. And man, the ability to, I sure as heck want to start trading these more swing trades from this style of pattern more and more. But yeah, like I was alluding to, I know it is in no way, shape, or form about how much money I'm actually taking away on this one, nor should it ever be in my trading career. But I just know, even though it's just one share, man, what this is building in my brain for what I know is going to be huge position sizes trading in the future, and what could lead to awesome trade opportunities like this that just let themselves work out and not be so hard pressed and fine tuned to watch every individual single tick price action, but just understand, hey, the chart sentiment is here. This is a former runner. This is a crazy ticker in itself. This could do some crazy things. Crazier things have happened, and never get in the way of what crazy wants to be crazy. That's a quote for you. 2022, Brent Faber. But yeah. And then kind of relating it to B-Big a little bit, I thought this was kind of following similar. This one's moving pretty nicely into the after hours here. But had a little parabolic day yesterday, and now putting in even more parabolic on the volume chart and the price action chart as well. A little gap up coming into market open. It was selling off a little bit as DWAC was still pushing to new high of days and new breakout levels, and then just had this random short squeeze that kind of caught a lot of people, then sold off a little bit, tried to put in a new high of day, rejected off of that, and then sold off back under VWAP, and then just fizzled around the rest of the afternoon and just looking weird like everything else does into the afternoon and the close, but now spiking all the way to $6. That's pretty crazy for that afternoon session. So that'll have to be on watch for the next few days. If we get any downside on that one, potentially, I just go through the motions of paper shorting, looking to pick tops, looking to play the downside on that one. But I'm sure there's going to be plenty of time if this thing gets parabolic enough to establish a short position in real terms of having the borrows available and being able to get filled if the price starts to speed up going against you for that panic downside. But paper, I'm sure that it's just going to be a lesson of, okay, I can identify this area as being the reversal point. Let's play that for the downside move covering into the little dip bottom. We might use that as a little experimental educational opportunity in the next few days. We'll keep our eye on it, but that is really all else that I had. Nothing huge or crazy convicted that I have on the watch list as of right now. Just going to continue to watch those morning dump setups in the pre-market pretty heavily, keep our day trades, not that we hold them sacred or dear, but just, hey, what do we really want to be a part of day trading? And using that Neuro example as a great lesson of it. You don't have to be in everything. You don't have to shoot everything that moves. You can just shoot the pretty stuff. And fine-tuning and picking our battles wisely there, and throwing the freaking hammer to the bone. That's another quote for you there. 2022, Brent Faber. Throw that hammer to the bone when the opportunity arises and when those factors line up. It can be very huge, and that's what gets to that exponential growth and leads us to the promised land. That is all I had. I sincerely thank you guys for watching. We will catch you guys on the next one.